David Risher, CEO of Lyft, put out their manifesto for what they want to do with autonomy. And highlighting that, Mr. Risher basically said Elon Musk was right.
Risher basically came out with this, what I will call a manifesto, right? Fairly generic. I think we've seen Uber do this already on their earnings call, and we broke down their kind of 5 pillars of autonomy. Uber's doing a great job, I think, in part because they have a Balaji who used to be in investor relations, back in the business, super smart on autonomy, now kind of formulating their messaging, which is, pretty obvious. And we've, talked about that at great length on this podcast. So they had their 5 pillars. Lyft has their 7 or 6 or 7 pillars, their vision for the AV chain, which, again, I'm going to read them off, but I think to our listeners, this is obvious. Self-driving technology, vehicle manufacturing, asset ownership and financing, fleet management, mobility platform and marketplace, and then rider demand and experience. Which of these 7 stand out to you as like unique or different, or when you read the whole thing, what kind of stood out to you as what they were trying to emphasize?
Vehicle manufacturing. That stood out to me because that's not a core strength of Lyft. It signals to me that the partnership strategy is accelerating. And as you've talked about on past podcasts, they're looking for an autonomous vehicle and they're looking to partner with OEMs to get more vehicles to put them on the platform. That's what that signals to me.
Yeah, and that's part of the fragmentation. The issue is they don't own their own autonomy technology. So the vehicle manufacturing is, and I think stuff that we talked about as it relates to neuro on our last podcast, where the platform plays a role. They have to bring money, because bringing your platform alone is not, I think, going to get it done. They have to, I think, also provide dollars where they're a participant in making sure that the OEMs are moving along and getting this. At some point, it flips on the OEMs where, these are companies trading at $5 PEs. They're flat on their ass, and that they're going to have to, I think, develop an AV strategy, because I think the volumes are going to be there to drive that. But I think that's the partnership role that they play. It's not just, hey, I'm the platform. You got to write a check, man.
What type of check size do you think those are going to have to be?
It depends. I mean, I think in the early days, we'll get into fleets next, but like fleets are in the tens. But we can see the dollars that are spent from autonomy companies. You're talking about hundreds of millions of dollars. And then I guess the implication of your question is a company with a $5 billion market cap really in the same position as Uber in terms of the size of the checks that they can actually write. Probably not. So, yeah, I don't know. I don't know how they can drive, how Lyft can be a driver of ensuring vehicle manufacturing exists, other than basically saying, hey, we're open to put AVs on our platform. We will deliver demand to them, so make them. But of course you are. That's, I don't think the OEMs needed Lyft to raise their hand and say, yeah, we're gonna generate demand if you start making a fragmented market. Uber ends up being the more dramatic player given their global footprint.
What if those vehicles were personally owned and the consumer could put their vehicles on the Lyft network, very similar to what Mr. Musk has talked about with the Tesla network?
I mean, I don't know why you phrase that as a what if. I think why we should be highlighting what you just said is something that was in this manifesto that I thought was very interesting, where Risher specifically, kind of head nodded Elon. He said, and let's quote, "As the cost of AV technology comes down and the availability broadens, we want every self-driving car to be Lyft-ready with turnkey access to our platform. That will make it possible for small and medium-sized fleet owners to invest in AV fleets that can be integrated into our supply the same way black cars and livery fleets are today." And then here's the key sentence. "A little further down the road, when Lyft-ready AV features come standard in every car, any car owner will become a potential partner." Okay? Any car owner. So that is basically what Elon talked about in terms of your Tesla sitting in your driveway, going out at 11 o'clock at night on the Friday when there's that peak demand. And that's, to me, that's an endorsement that is, again, he says a little further down the road. I'm sure if you press these guys on it, it's going to be like, well, that's 10 years away. And by that time, all these different things are going to happen. The risk in that, though, Grayson, is, that addresses the supply issue that many have talked about that autonomy can't overcome. You have a lot of talking heads out there like, oh my God, I've done the math and no way Uber will, or excuse me, Waymo or Tesla will ever take over Lyft because, they could never have the fleet size. But if we're now acknowledging that private owners could, have their cars go out and be part of the supply and then come home and be their personally owned car, then how does that argument hold up?
It doesn't. You must be watching CNBC too much.
Grayson, I see this on X from people that we both know exclaiming this on their X feeds, not only on CNBC. So don't attack the Wall Street analysts, because I'm sure there's a couple of people out there that as well as I that have pushed this same theory.
Yes, they push the same theory, but what they fundamentally miss is that the average mainstream consumer is still drowning in inflation and they're struggling. The average mainstream consumer buying a vehicle is a very, very large purchase. In some cases, the largest purchase they'll ever make in their life. If they can purchase a vehicle and or lease a vehicle and then turn it into a cash generating asset where it pays for the vehicle for the entire month and pays for the insurance, pays for the gas, that demand will accelerate. That just benefits Lyft. The consumer will drive Lyft's growth.
Yes, but I also think there's the possibility that with the collapse and consolidation of OEMs, because of the change in the model altogether, and you get greater scale, and you just change how cars are developed, software-defined cars, moving to Foxconn, like taking a BYD approach, because if for competitive reasons, the overall cost of the car is going to come down. The technology to make it autonomous is going to come down. And to your point, for some, you can offset the cost of that car with autonomy. So then the pushback to me, well, who's going to allow that? Who's going to allow that to happen on their car? Well, you have, lots of Uber drivers and Lyft drivers today that are out there driving their cars and allowing their cars to be subject to whatever the wear and tear every day in their cars. So those are the people, which is exactly what Risher was saying in his piece, is now that Uber or that Lyft driver can do something else, send their car out and earn some amount of money and then, be doing something else with their life. I mean, that was his point.
He's right. It's going to grow the Lyft market. Lyft currently completes 2 million rides per day in all 50 states in Canada. You start adding on these autonomous vehicles, number is going to increase. It is going to be a positive catalyst for Lyft. And what the consumer is going to do furthermore, they're going to put pressure on the OEMs to build these autonomous vehicles, because they're going to buy it from Foxconn or BYD or another OEM that's doing it. The consumer is really going to dictate this market, and we can all go back and thank Mr. Musk for what he's doing with that. The same way that Mr. Musk drove the market towards electrification, Mr. Musk is driving it towards personal ownership of autonomous vehicles.
I mean, again, you may be right. And that seemed like the more logical path here, in that it's positive for Uber and Lyft because it speaks to the fragmentation that's so important. However, it again validates this concept of private car ownership. And that is the one missing piece in terms of how do if I had one autonomous fleet with my own platform, how do I get the scale? That's exactly how people have defended Uber and saying you can't, they'll never be able to get the scale. Now you've just demonstrated how they do it. Now, look, it may be that if I'm Waymo and I still haven't licensed my technology to another OEM, I'm not going to allow another autonomous technology on my platform to handle all the rides. I get it. There's complications to work through there, but let's look at it from the Tesla standpoint. They don't license the technology. They stay, true to their existing mission, assuming that the technology ends up working, which I know a lot of our listeners don't believe is going to happen. That is the path to a competitive, fully autonomous fleet in terms of other elements here, and fleet management being a big part of how all this works. They made a big point in this manifesto, again, that I'm going to call it, to really emphasize what I would call the flex drive, right? And, I think we need to do more work on understanding what flex drive really does, because my perception is more of it just enables you, if you didn't own a car, to be able to own a car, to lease a car, right? But the way they position it is our AV strategy then is clear. Our world-class fleet management, so they're calling flex drive world-class fleet management. Sophisticated marketplace engine, that's just the platform. Large-scale demand, that's the platform. represent the best way for AV companies, OEMs, and fleet owners to commercialize their assets. So they're pushing forward FlexDrive as a differentiation so that when, let's say, Nuro partners with whoever, Ford, to make up a name, even though they may actually, Uber might be their partner there. But as other technology companies partner with OEMs, that FlexDrive is going to be a reason why Lyft is going to be brought in as the third partner. Like, are we missing something on FlexDrive? I mean, are they doing fueling? Are they doing car cleaning? Like, what's the most important element of fleet management?
Maintenance. Nobody thinks about it, but maintenance is the single most important thing. Tire tread. Are the brakes working? Are the seatbelts working? It all really comes down to maintenance at the end of the day. The interesting statistic to highlight here on Lyft, fleets under Lyft's management maintain nearly 90% utilization on our platform. It's uptime. Go speak to Lee White, former UPS executive. He'll tell you the number one metric they care about the most, uptime. Fleet management with FlexDrive can give Lyft the uptime to fully optimize that AV fleet.
Right. So to me, that part of uptime is location. Where is where is that group of cars going to get serviced, stored until they're sent out into the market? And then when you pick an advantageous location, do you have power there? So, the timeline to getting power there. And then maybe the third leg of the stool on that one is, which you love to talk about, I'm surprised you didn't bring it up, robots. Like, do you have robots at some point layered in, cleaning these cars in terms of the management?
You're seeing companies now that are popping up that are offering, let's call them the quote unquote depots, mostly around airports. There's a lot of movement around LAX, and this is going back 10, 12 years. Lyft had a depot by LAX. I don't know today if it still does, but there are several large scale charging companies that are charging fleet vehicles down by LAX. Based on that trend, I fully expect to see them pop up around airports, and then in some cases they're going to have to pop up in the urban core, because as you and I both know, airports are one of the largest origination points.
Yeah, but you also, when you're peak and your Friday nights, the bars are an origination point as well. So beyond that, I'm sure they're going to argue like, oh yeah, you have to manage the fleet, and when your software already manages this massive and amorphous supply of drivers deciding when they're going to come on the network or off the network, and then the demand that exists out there, managing like cars that are there at your at your disposal doesn't seem like that complex of an issue that couldn't be designed otherwise. Again, maybe I'm missing that, and we just have to learn more about FlexDrive. So, to our Lyft listeners, definitely want to learn more about FlexDrive. I'm having a hard time seeing how that is going to be. I mean, again, I know like if you're trying to make your autonomy story out there, like you got to lean forward with like what you got that the other guy doesn't necessarily have. And by the way, when the other guy doesn't necessarily have it, they don't want it. Like I've asked this, like I don't think there's an intent to own. There's certainly an opportunity for them to own. I think if my advice to Dara would be like, fuck it, do a real estate play and then build up all of these locations, and 5 years from now, spin it off to somebody like private equity guy. And I think you'd make money that way, but whatever. That is not what they want to do. Maybe Lyft is leaning in on that. I just don't know if FlexDrive in its current state is the answer.
Well, FlexDrive is going to need charging infrastructure, fueling infrastructure. If you look at terawatts of the world, that's what you're going to need.
I mean, that's what the OEMs like. That would be a missing part that the OEMs need, which they're emphasizing is like, oh, Uber's doing it as a third party, but like, okay, but are you really doing that, or are you just doing leasing?